Welcome to the Happy Home Birth Podcast, your source for positive natural childbirth stories and your community of support, education, and encouragement in all things home birth and motherhood. The word midwife means with woman. What does it mean to be with woman? What does it look like and how does it feel? Hey there, happy home birthers. Welcome to this week's episode of the Happy Home Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and this week we are speaking with the incredible midwife, published author, and poet, Janelle Alier, who, in my opinion, is the embodiment of genuine midwifery care. We are going to hear how she became a midwife or how midwifery happened to her. We'll hear her journey through her own births, and you will get to learn about her beautiful project that she just recently completed, The Shortest Stories, a book of birth haiku that odes to the births she has attended. This episode is going to be a favorite for mothers and midwives alike, and a beautiful reminder of what it means to be with women. Let's jump in. Please remember that the opinions of my guests may not necessarily reflect my own and vice versa. And this show is not medical advice, it's an educational tool. So continue to take empowered responsibility for your health and your family. Janelle, my dear, wonderful friend, thank you so much for coming back on the Happy Home Birth Podcast.
Thanks for having me. We've had some fun this year, Caitlin.
It has
2025
been,
has brought us some good times, so I'm glad to keep it going.
yeah, it's been our year. This has been great.
Yeah.
Thanks for the good times. So you were on the podcast a long time ago, back in episode 60. I think it was 64. I'll link it below. But
Okay.
it's been a while.
Yeah.
So would you mind introducing yourself and your family to the listeners?
Yeah, I am Janelle Alier. I am a certified nurse midwife. I live here in Greenville, South Carolina, so Caitlin and I are local. That's fun. I have three kids. I have a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. I became a labor nurse in 2008 and then a midwife in 2016. So next year will be 10 years of midwifery. And at first, I worked in the hospital, the same hospital where I was a nurse. I worked as a nurse midwife. And then when I had my first child in 2019, I started my own practice, Paris Mountain Midwifery, and now I do home birth.
Wow. And what was that transformation like for you? So you started as a labor and delivery nurse. How did you decide to go on and become a midwife?
Mm. Well, I think that I went into nursing not being totally sold on that was it for me.
Mm.
I remember even in school, like my classmates being just really excited. This is awesome. This is our dream. We're going to be nurses. And I was kind of just like, oh no, like I don't like this. and and it just was kind of like just there were things about it that I did like, and my dad was paying for school, so I was really motivated like once I had kind of gotten so far into it of like, well, I'm going to finish it, but I'm going to have to figure out like how to make it work for me. And then I ended up really loving like the preventative care aspect of it. So like taking healthy people and helping them stay that way. And I didn't really see midwifery as like the expression of that at the time, but I thought women's health was something that, okay, I could do that. Like that's something I could tolerate. And not really knowing a lot about it, just kind of claimed that is where I was headed. And so my first job out of school was in labor and delivery. And then it sort of like was just this time in my 20s where I had so much clarity and felt like, oh, I'm a nurse because I'm supposed to be a midwife. And that was so exciting. And so it was always like a slow burn, like I didn't start out with like a ton of clarity or information, even, but just slowly over time, I always say it happened to me.
Mhm.
It was just what I was supposed to be doing. And so it found its way. And I had always kind of thought, okay, I will go back to school and get an advanced degree in nursing. And then it became really obvious that, oh, it's midwifery, and
Mm,
that's why I'm on this planet, and that's why I'm a nurse, and so, yeah, it was
man.
not because I was clever or figured it out, it was just supposed to be that way, and I wish it were a better story because I hear other midwives, "Oh, I delivered my mom's, 8th baby, and that's was my first, whatever," and I'm like, "No, I don't even know if I knew what a midwife was,
Mhm.
but it found me."
I think there's something so special about that, and just the way that you are a midwife and having seen you in action, seen you act as a midwife, it's one of those things where oh, that is that is what it was meant to be. And I just pray that for every person, like that they could have that sense of, yes, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And
That's like
then you
it.
just exude excellence at it because that's who you are.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, well, it's true. But truly for everyone, like, wow, how cool would it be if everyone got to be their
Yeah.
thing the way that Janelle is a midwife? Just dreams, dreams.
Oh, that's kind. Yeah, I do
Well,
feel that way about it, that
yeah.
it's sometimes I'm like, "Good thing I'm a midwife because there's, like, nothing else interesting about me." I'm very, like, vanilla and boring, but midwifery makes me, like, kind of interesting, and that's fun, I'm like, "Thank goodness I don't have anything else to offer." So good thing that it worked out.
I don't know about that, but we'll take it. We'll ride with that. Okay,
Yeah.
so you go through this experience of nursing leads to midwifery, leads to practicing as a midwife in the hospital.
Mhm.
And then you switch to home birth care. So what was that transition like? What made you decide, you know what? I've been doing this in the hospital, but I think I would like to open my own home birth practice.
Mm. Yeah, that was another kind of slow burn, in some ways where, I think I always had it in the back of my mind that it was like the hospital practice never really felt sustainable for me as a person, like, this cannot be what my whole life ends up looking like, is just, bleeding out for the hospital, because even just the schedule, it was these 24-hour call shifts where you would work 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. and you get off at 7 a.m. and that's your day off. You have to sleep because you just worked 24 hours, but not too much because you also have to sleep that night so you can be back in the office the next morning. You hope maybe that's only like once a week, but there's busy times. There's this midwife's out on leave, whatever. Like it just was always, you do that a couple times a week and you're just burnt toast consistently. So I kind of knew, I'm getting experience, I'm getting my feet under me, I'm working in this high risk medical center, just seeing it all and becoming, there's this word that I learned called, what is it? Oh, I think it's Wanderhaar. It's maybe like an old world, like German word or something, but it means journey year, wander years. Sorry, wander years, where after you would finish your apprenticeship or you would finish your training, you would spend those years traveling and learning from the masters to really perfect your
Mm.
craft. And so while I wasn't necessarily traveling much anyway, I felt like this is my Vonderhaar where I'm
Mhm.
like moving from novice to expert, but it didn't feel like, oh, this is all that there is. And I kind of thought to myself, like, one day I'll do my own thing. It was actually a joke because I had moved out here to Paris Mountain, and my way of complaining about work, I would say, well, when it's Paris Mountain midwifery, like when I rule the world, blah, 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 and so I kind of always thought, oh, I'll have my family, my kids will grow up a little, and then maybe in like my 5 to 10 year plan is like maybe one day I would have my own practice. And then I had my first child in January of 2019, and that spring, while I was on maternity leave, they announced that they would be closing the birth center that the midwives operated in addition to hospital deliveries. We also would do out of hospital birth across the street at a freestanding birth center. And it had only been open a few years and really, it was never supposed to make a ton of money. There's nothing to bill for when babies just come out without lots of interventions, without anesthesia and even placing an IV. So we kind of knew that we weren't going to be like a big money making program for the hospital, but I'm a little bit of like an existential person anyway, like a big thinker. And so it was like just a really great fit for me because I felt so like this is a community service.
Mhm.
Like we are serving the community. Moms are usually the medical decision makers for the family. And we are going to take really good care of this mom, and when this kid grows up and breaks his arm, she's going to bring him back to this health system because we are her medical home. It was like this long game that I felt like we were playing of like healthy moms, healthy births, make healthy families that make healthy communities. And so I was just that really like fueled my fire. And when they announced while I was on maternity leave that they were going to be closing it, there was like a merger that happened and they said it wasn't about money, but a lot of the feel good programs that didn't make money, they all kind of went away at the same time mysteriously.
Mhm.
And, the community was really like, save the birth center. But by the time the midwives even knew about it, it had just already like been decided from on
Mhm.
high or whatever that we were going to be closing that summer. So I spent that summer just kind of looking into like, could I have my own practice? What would that even look like? And this is in 2019. In 2018, the legislation in South Carolina had finally been updated. That didn't change a lot with practice, but it brought the language up to date with current practice and moved like the relationship with physicians from supervision to collaboration,
Mm.
because docs aren't willing to supervise nurse practitioners, but they'll collaborate with you. And so that had happened just the year before, and there had not been an independent nurse midwifery practice in the community since I don't even know when, maybe the 50s. I mean, back in the day, that's what the nurse midwives did is they worked in the community with the country doctors, and that's
Mhm.
how it was. But in recent times, it just wasn't a thing. And so I kind of spent that summer figuring out like, how can I do this? And launched on October 1st of that same year. And the timing was amazing because fall of 2020, I got going, and by spring, or I'm sorry, fall of 19, I got going. And by spring of 2020, the world was upside down in a pandemic. And I could not have launched practice even if I wanted to, because you couldn't even like buy a box of gloves,
Mhm.
so the timing was really cool. By the time the pandemic hit and the world went upside down, I was like rocking and rolling with Paris Mountain Midwifery and having my own, my next baby came in May of 2020. And so that was a really like, again, it happened to me. It was perfect. It was meant to be.
Mhm. And how special was that? Because I thought about that a lot, how the birth center closed.
Mhm.
That really threw people on their heads. All of these families who maybe weren't ready quite yet to go the home birth route, but didn't want the hospital experience. They had this
Yeah.
birth center. It was such a
Yeah.
sweet middle ground for so many people. So
Yeah.
that closing was just shocking and awful. And then the pandemic hits, and the hospital system is a nightmare. Like,
Yeah.
truly terrifying for these families who would have absolutely chosen the birth center. Now it's like, oh, I'm going to the hospital and it's a nightmare there. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen with me and my family and how it's going to unfold. And then all of those people then are starting to have to decide, okay, am I going to do that, or
Mhm.
should I maybe like give birth at home? And so having the option of home birth midwives in the community, especially one that they knew from maybe the
Mhm.
birth center or the hospital before, I think that's such beautiful timing.
Most of my first clients in the home setting in 2020 and 2021 were women who maybe had delivered in the birth center. and gotten a little taste and a little empowerment and said, "Oh, well, I'm not going to the hospital now. You took this option away, so I'm
Mhm.
doing it on my own terms at home." And that was cool. A lot of women that I already had a relationship with from the birth center setting. And then a lot of families who maybe would not have considered home birth in the first place, but said, you know what? We suddenly realized the hospital's for sick people.
Mhm.
And we're not trying to get involved in that and get quarantined from our baby or my husband not be able to just like it. Even, the hospital was saying, like, we're not going to exclude doulas and we're not going to, but it's like the rules were changing daily. It felt very up in the air. Like nobody wanted that.
Mhm. Yeah. Ah, beautiful timing. Well, let's take a pause with your practice and scoot back,
Mhm.
because at the same time that this practice is opening, evolving, you are having your own babies. So, can we go back and talk about that experience of you giving birth to your three children?
Yeah, I can give you like I'll give you the mini sode,
I love
the
it.
short version. My first two births actually really kind of ended up taking the turn from planned groovy home delivery to the only goal I cared about was avoid cesarean. So they were really those like both and kind of births where I did it, I pulled it off, I did the hard thing, I got the baby out, but not without lots of change of plans, interventions that I hadn't wanted or anticipated, and sort of just giving up on some of my dreams about how my births would look. So that was tricky for me to navigate, as a person and also as a provider. I found that it was not something I could really achieve to like completely turn off my midwife brain. And I just always explained that like that's who I am. Just because I'm giving birth today, doesn't really mean that I'm suddenly not a midwife. Like it's part of my identity and how my brain works and how I see the world. And so there was always this goal of like, oh, just be the mom, don't be the midwife, but that never really was achievable or realistic. My first birth was, well, in the last days of my pregnancy, my midwife became unavailable. And so my team kind of fell apart a little bit. It, actually, one of the funny stories about that was like on my own due date, I attended a birth for my midwife as the midwife. I'm the midwife. You know, Looking back on that, I'm like, I probably shouldn't have done that or wouldn't do that again. But at the time, I like really felt for this family because they were in the same situation of like finding themselves here giving birth and all of a sudden don't have a provider who's available. So that was sort of funny. Like I laugh about that a lot of like I was so salty that I was at a birth that wasn't mine on my due date. um, but 2 days later, that was a Friday, was my due date. And 2 days later, on Sunday night, I went into labor myself and I was unprepared for, well, maybe not unprepared, but I did not expect, I'll say that, I did not expect the level of endurance and resolve that it would take to get a 10-pound baby here as a first time mom. I went into labor on a Sunday night. By Monday morning, it was really rocking and rolling. I was working really hard, and it stayed that way until she was born and in the wee hours Wednesday. So, in there, I decided to go into the hospital. We kind of pulled out all the stops to get her here. I was just on the edge of criteria the entire time for cesarean and was just really sometimes I'll say it was a little house on the prairie birth. And what I mean by that is like I just kind of like pretended like surgery wasn't an option, even though it's like it was like maybe 10 out of 10 other women would have ended up with one, but because it was me, I just kind of pushed a lot of limits. And It just took many, many hours of labor and many, many hours of pushing to get her here. And by then, I was just like a shell of a person. And that was a pretty hard way to go into motherhood for me. My kids are all close together. So my first two are 15 months apart. So I had got another chance at it in May of 2020. And that one also turned into an unplanned transfer with a surprise breach in labor. And it was very much like my midwife had not delivered a breach, and she was not trying to start with me, who was, another midwife. And it was this like, you have risked out of care, that was just very clear that like um, we're done here and I gotta figure out something else. So I went from like an animal in transition on the floor of my bedroom to walking out my front door making phone calls of how I'm going to pull this off. And the first phone call I made was just to the attending, let me just see who's on call at the hospital. And I had only at that time been gone from the hospital for like 6 months. And someone answered who I did not know. This is, oh, Dr. Jones or whoever. And I'm like, this is the situation. I'm coming in hot. The baby's breech. I am not having surgery today. And she said, I don't do vaginal breech birth. And I just hung up the phone, like, all right, next. Like, I got to figure this out. It was 4 a.m. on a Saturday. So I thought of a couple docs who maybe aren't necessarily like breech people, but they were good humans who weren't going to cut me open when I was telling them not to, kind of people. And I didn't reach either of them. And then I thought of a doc who had, when I was a little baby labor and delivery nurse, she was a little baby OBGYN resident, like 2007, 2008. And she had gone to Cameroon to do mission work and was recently back in the States. So it was like, ring, ring, it is time for some Cameroon in Greenville, South Carolina, because my baby is breech and I intend to decline a cesarean. It was the shortest conversation. And it was just, she was so gracious to even take my call. I woke her up in her bed and I said, it's Janelle. I'm on my way to the hospital. The baby's breech. I'm fully dilated and I intend to decline a C-section. And she was quiet for a minute, probably just taking that in. And she said, you know the risk and benefits. And I said, yes. And she said, I'll meet you there. And so she met me at the hospital. And, a few hours later, there was some getting organized and even in that time, it was kind of like, okay, well, you're not really fully dilated. And I don't know if this is going to work. And the last thing, they said before I pushed, I was on my back on the operating room table, like 14 people in the room, NICU, like we're this ready to have the C-section. It was like, that I'm going to cut you. If this goes sideways, I'm going to cut you. It's going to be fast. And as a mom, you're like, if you have to pull this baby out of my eyeball, it's life or death, like do that. But I want a shot and I know I'm a good candidate. I had a 10-pound baby a year earlier. You know what I mean? Like I've got a good pelvis and I've come all this way and now I just have to get the baby out. Like just watch me.
Mhm.
So on one hand, I felt like completely on top of the world. I took on the system. I won. I avoided the C-section. But on the other hand, just avoiding a C-section is a real bummer birth plan,
Mhm.
and I really had to grieve like that second birth. It's supposed to be fast and easy, at home in the pool of water. I really had to like grieve my groovy home birth
Mhm.
again. And while I would kind of say my first birth was traumatic, I would use that word. I didn't find my second birth to be as traumatic because it was more empowering that I was able to do it and able to do it my way. It still was disappointing.
Mhm.
And so by the time I had my third baby on the way, I felt a little bit burned out on like planning and paying for home births that hadn't happened. And I just sort of decided to like DIY a little bit. And I don't know if I could really, with accuracy, claim like free birth because I was in attendance. And, while I am a really poor midwife for myself, I still, had the privilege of having like plenty of information and
Mm.
plenty of ways of like advocating and helping myself. And I had a friend who's about 2 hours away, another nurse midwife who practices on the other side of Asheville, and she helped me kind of piece together some prenatal care. So it wasn't totally a wild pregnancy, but it was sort of just like a let's just see how it goes
Mhm.
because I have outsourced too much in my previous births and felt like I had paid a price. So the little drama with the last birth, because I joke that I had to have a little something just to stay on brand. It had to be, was that my family got COVID that week of my due date. And we were pretty sick because by now it was January of 2022 and we had avoided it all that time. It was our first time getting it. So our immune systems hadn't seen it before. And just during the pandemic, while I was, pregnant myself and taking care of pregnant people, I was pretty careful to not, we didn't know as much. And I wasn't trying to spread it around and wasn't trying to get it. And so it came for me when I was on maternity leave in January 2020. It was like that Omicron variant where everybody had it at the holidays. So I started to feel sick on Sunday. And by Monday, it was like, I am not okay. And I took a home test and, oh, we all have COVID. And so that was really disappointing because I had felt really strong and capable like going into that. And suddenly I felt like, well, that had been taken away. But all things considered, for being 40 weeks pregnant, I did recover pretty quickly. And then my water broke on the due date in a fit of COVID cough on Thursday.
Oh my word.
And it was my most like obstetrically boring, beautiful delivery, 6 hours of labor. So, going into it, I kind of knew I probably don't have time for like a full quarantine. I'm probably not going to invite a lot of people to this birth because, I don't want to expose everyone. I tried to kind of fire my doula and say, well, don't come over here. That's foolish, But then I got into labor and was like, get over here, called my doula. So she was in attendance. And one of my favorite memory from that birth is actually at the very end. I was standing in the shower and I knew that the baby was about to come. And I opened my eyes for the first time in a long time. And she was just kneeling in front of me, like with a towel.
Mm.
And it was like she was an angel to me at that moment of like, oh my gosh, someone is going to catch this baby. Like, thank God. I'm not that mom who like peacefully just receives her own baby. I'm like real busy trying to fight for my life, kind of a laborer. And so that was just a really like tender memory for me. And especially because I'm a midwife. Obviously, I value that kind of care. Obviously, I think it's just for a lot of people like the most beautiful thing. But I've never had a midwife catch any of my babies. Never had a water birth, never, so seeing my doula just like ready to help me receive my baby was such a like beautiful moment of being cared for
Mm.
and being and my husband was right there. He was busy like trying to keep the glass shower door on the tracks, like not letting me rip it off. So somebody had to catch the baby. I was unavailable, and it's still just like a really treasured memory of being cared for, like it wasn't midwifery care, but it was my doula who showed me like this is what with women can be
Mhm.
like. Yeah, so those are sort of my births in a nutshell. It is hard for me to talk about my births without being in some ways a little negative about myself and about midwifery. So I am pretty careful with them and I hold them close. But yeah, you can probably draw some conclusions there without me having to really
Yeah,
go into the dark side.
for sure. Well, and now that we've got this kind of background understanding of this is your experience as a woman giving birth to her children, these are the things that you went through. I'd love to now talk about the shape that your practice has taken, the shape that midwifery Janelle's way has taken. So, what does it mean to you when we talk about being with women, when we talk about being a midwife? What does that mean to you, Janelle?
Mm. so many things. Um, I don't get in the weeds too much as like a thinker. Well, no, I take that back. I'm definitely an overthinker, but I really like a picture. I appreciate big pictures. So
Mhm.
like the more I can zoom out, usually the happier I am. Like I think a lot about like what you just asked. Like what kind of midwife am I? What kind of midwife do I want to be? What kind of midwife is best and good and right? And it looks different for different people. Um, I think I think sort of like the main tenets or philosophy of care that I hold to is just to center the fact that it often doesn't have anything to do with me, um, and removing as much ego as I can. And what I tell women is, you don't need me. What I offer is, I believe that as your hired expert, that my job is to partner with you and give you information, inspiration, make sure that you have informed consent, risks, benefits, alternatives, and then to support you in your choice, even when it doesn't align with my guidelines. There's guidelines, there's recommendations that I have, there's things that I think everybody should do or could do. But I also believe that there's no one more invested in the outcome and in the baby than the mom, and she's the one who lives in her body. So I just kind of have to continually like make sure that I'm clear on that
Mm.
and that I'm seeing my role as what it is realistic. Like I'm not in charge and I'm not the decision maker. Um, and I wouldn't really have it any other way.
It honestly, just hearing it makes me want to cry. Like it's so beautiful, Janelle. Like this self emptying. Like, let me empty my thoughts of, what I would do, this or that. Let me release that along with my ego so that I can be here for you in the way that you feel in your body is best to move forward. The depth of it. I just like the depth of being held through that perspective is undeniable.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, I agree. It feels right. And the times that I don't get it right, it feels really wrong.
Mm.
Yeah, I think you have to have that intact sort of integrity about just clarity of what you're doing. Otherwise, you'll suffer.
Hmm. Yeah. And how do you think that your birth experiences and the way that you experienced, yeah, just birth unfolding for you, especially your first two, how do you think that impacts your perspective of what it means to be a midwife and how you care for your clients?
Yeah, I do appreciate my births. While there are, certain things that I would say are really regrettable, I also have, now all these years later, I'm able to say that I wouldn't change them. Um, and part of that is like because I've gotten to know my kids and um, the way that they talk about their births, like, oh, mom, you had to work so hard to get me out. And that language is language that I've given them, that
Mhm.
they're repeating back to me. But when I really think about it, I'm like, well, when they were born, they were also there.
Mhm.
And those were their experiences. And what makes like a person holistically a person includes the whole story. And, now that they're 5, 6 years old and can have some like in their childlike way like appreciation for their birth stories and it really integrates into like who they are as people, that gives me an appreciation for what their births were like. And my son is like so funny when he talks about like I tried to turn around and I couldn't, so I had to come out bottom first. And he loves the idea. I told him, like there was meconium everywhere. And he's like, "And I pooped on your leg." Like, perfect 5-year-old boy joke, like, so they just, getting to know my kids and who they are makes me feel like you and I had those births together, and while I'm
Mhm.
not like a everything happens for a reason person, I guess I am a everything happens things tend to happen how they ought to, or they shake out how they should kind of a person. Don't think about that too hard, but you know what I'm
No,
saying?
the idea of everything can be used
Mhm.
for good. Part of it is perspective wise, but
Yeah.
also like, yeah, there is a divine aspect to it too of like everything can be worked for good.
Yeah, those were our stories, and I own them and celebrate them, and I'm really grateful for them now, and as far as,
Mhm.
like, how it's impacted me as a midwife, I would like to say I was, like, a pretty good midwife before I had kids. It wasn't like a, "Oh, now you get it,"
Mhm.
kind of a thing. It was that kind of actually offended me. I was like, I didn't need to have a traumatic experience
Right.
to get it, but my husband's like, "Well, if you only had unicorn and rainbows births, then, you wouldn't really be able to, like your clients would just." It was like, "Well, I don't know, you shoulda just squatted deeper or something." Like, in a way, I think that it did give perspective, and I think that being in that category of woman who has my outcomes were good. Obstetrically speaking, I was a healthy mom and I had healthy babies.
Mhm.
So being able to really identify with people who, are in that category and get written off, like, what do you have to complain about? You're a healthy mom and you had a healthy baby, and they just feel so like broken and disappointed. And, it's like, no, girl, like how you got there matters.
Mhm.
How you felt, how you were made to feel. It matters. Like, of course, having a healthy baby, and I feel like that's the floor.
Mhm.
Like, we live in a resourced place where, like, just having a healthy baby, like, let's aim for the ceiling, people.
Mhm.
Like, this is just like the baseline. Like, surviving it should not be the goal. Like, having a healthy mom and having a healthy baby is the most important thing, but it's how you got there really matters as well. And so being a midwife to those women is really my jam in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. I think, and maybe there's a little bit of differentiation there with my credential as well, because the licensed midwives in our community who are not nurses are really good at being experts in normal birth. But if you're a woman who falls through the cracks or gets a big curveball, sometimes, yeah, you fall through the cracks if you get the curveball because you have now fallen outside of normal, and
Mhm.
they are experts in normal. So being a nurse midwife and saying, "Hey, like, I'm your ride or die, and you're in charge, and I'm gonna support you in how you want it to look and what you wanna prioritize," is a really, important thing to me, because I'm kinda like, "Well, you got this, and the only reason that you would invite me or hire me to attend you is in case you get a curveball or to guard your safety, to keep you out of the ditches." And so that's kind of how I, like, have integrated my births into my midwifery, is like, "Hey, girl, if your baby tries to back out, I got you."
And that knowledge, I think of, it can be, and sometimes we think about this in the hospital setting of, it's just there's so many people, it's so constant. Everyone's, they're just catching babies or babies are being born constantly there. So it's
Mhm.
very hard to see the individual mother baby team and the
Yeah.
fact that like this is the most important day of this person's life.
Yeah,
I'm just thinking like how with you, you have experienced your most important day go a way that you did not want it to go. And
Mhm.
so what you can offer your clients because of that, if something is going away. They did not want it to go. I just can only imagine that that feels like salve on a wound. Like that is so healing in and of itself.
You mean for me?
For them to
Oh, yeah.
have a care provider who understands what they're going through if something is going differently than expected. You know that it's not just like, oh, well, this is
Mhm.
just a day of work for me. No, you've been there. This is
Mhm.
this is the most important thing, and you can deeply relate with someone
Mhm.
who is experiencing the upset, pain, trauma of things changing.
Yeah, it's never just a transfer or just, oh, an intervention, a change of plans. Um, and, when I did you mentioned, like, just the volume of, like, in the hospital, it's just babies, babies, babies. Like, when I worked in the hospital, I would finish a shift and just feel like, man, I was just a pretty rotten midwife to like 5 families, and I
Mm,
really wanted to be a jam up midwife to like 1 or 2. So being in the home setting just like allows like the richness of it, the sacredness of it to really have like the priority or the front row seat. Not that you can't, you know, um, preserve some of that with a change of plan, but it's never just a change of plan. Yeah.
yeah.
It's huge, and it's having yeah, being invested in my clients and having, rapport and relationships, I think goes a long way. And then my own experiences is like, I get it, and we're in it together.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. So, one thing that I wanted to bring up was your amazing book that has just been published and is out into the world. It's called The Shortest Stories: A Midwife Writes Birth Haiku on Each Beginning. And I just got to read it for the first time, which, Janelle, I have to say, I thought I would get this book and I would go take it and sit at a little coffee shop and drink some coffee and read it. But instead, I was able to receive it from you at a birth. And I got to sit at my best friend's birth and read your haiku about different births that you've attended. And it was the most wonderful way to get to experience this birth. I mean this book. I can't get over how special that was. But could you introduce us to The Shortest Stories? What is this book about? How did it come to be?
Okay. So I thought a lot about that too. Like, why now? And because I've been writing haiku since I really kind of started doing it for fun and regularly when I was in graduate school. So when I was getting my master's in midwifery, it started with we were supposed to share like the clinical story of our first catches with our professors and our classmates. And I remember being like, oh, I'm really tired and I don't want to like type that all out. So I wrote a haiku and put that in our classroom message board so that everyone would know that I had caught my first baby. And I think I eventually did like circle back and do the actual sharing. But a classmate then wrote one back, and then we were kind of like, we just kept it going, and it became this thing in my cohort. And our program director like read some of them at our graduation dinner, and so it sort of just became like a fun thing that I was doing while I was in grad school. And then I mean, midwifery is just so birth is so inspiring, and you leave births with your heart just so full and feeling like you just want to write a novel or something. But there's also this idea, in fact, can I read one from the intro? Is
Please.
that okay?
Please.
Yeah, because it's kind of what I'm getting at. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so this is a haiku from the introduction of the book. And it says, attend your first birth. You'll want to write a novel, but you'll be speechless.
Oh,
And so, I have always fancied myself like creative, and I like words. I'm definitely a words person. Love to read and love other people's poetry. And so writing poems after births was like a great fit, but I'm just not somebody who's going to spend a lot of time like writing longer pieces of prose. Or the thing about haiku is like it's so accessible. It's 3 lines. Anybody can do it. There's this little recipe. Here's the formula. This is how you do it. And it's kind of fun, almost like a little game with yourself to just mull it over. And I'll usually have an idea because every birth, is going to present you with some kind of funny moment or profound moment, or, just there's always lots of material. So it's kind of just over time become like just a little personal practice. And just like birth is not always unicorns and rainbows, some of the poems are really heavy or a little dark. Some of them are really funny and lighthearted. And I think that the collection, curated into this book, you kind of get it all. No one explains the whole birth, but
Mhm.
you can definitely see that, like, the spectrum of some of these are heartbreaking and some of these are going to make you laugh. And that's birth.
Mhm. It what I thought was so special when I was reading each of these is no, I don't know the full story of what happened in these situations, but I felt this kindred spirit with these people. I felt
Mm,
like I could understand the story even without knowing the story. And there's something so profound about that. Just
mm,
this little nugget of information provides so much feeling.
yeah.
And birth just is so full of feeling, Janelle. Like, I know you know this as you're going in and out of these people's lives and watching lives actually come to fruition and mothers becoming mothers. There's just
Mhm.
wow, there's nothing like that. There is no other thing like that. And
Right.
for you to be able to take that and somehow make this small little haiku be so filled with that feeling is just
Mhm.
it's so special. It is just so joyful to read. Even the sad ones, like it still produces something in your heart of connection and love and reverence for what birth is.
Yeah. You asked, like, how did it come to be? So I guess there's the theme there with everything in my life is that it happens to me. But there is a local small press called Good Printed Things, and the heart and soul of it is a gal named Lib Ramos. She's had a few interns, I think, over the years, but almost everything she does is pretty much like her own project. And she does small things, it collaborates with authors and with artists and does a lot of like little chapbooks or zines. And so she had done a collection of about motherhood. She'll put out an author call of I'm making this collection, and people will submit their work, and she'll make a book out of it. And so she had done one on motherhood. I want to say it was like 2021 or 2022. And of course, at that time, I was like launching my practice and having my own babies, and just all the fun stuff was passing me by.
Mm,
And I'd heard about it, and I said to her, "Oh man, I wish I had, been paying attention, because I would have submitted some of my birth haiku for your motherhood collection." And she was like, "Birth haiku? Like, we should make a whole collection of that." And at that time, I was really kind of like, "No, like, it just it didn't feel it felt very personal, and it still does feel very personal. I didn't tell people that this was something that I did. It was really just a personal practice. I didn't write them for the parents. So when the idea like first came up, it was like, no, that's not something that I would do. But then over time, I think, yeah, the more bursts that I attended, and just the more you zoom out and you realize, like, you don't know anyone who's not born of a woman. Like,
mm,
most of this is very universally relatable. And there was also a grant involved, which the publisher did all the work for. I didn't really have anything to do with it, but it started last fall. And she said, okay, well, there's this grant available. So if I write it and if we get it, will you do this?" And at that time, I was in a place where, like, yeah, that feels like I couldn't really picture, like, how beautiful and well done it could be, um, but I knew that, like, there were people that could,
Mm.
that she could make it happen. So I was like, "Okay, well, if you write the grant, you do all the work, we'll just see," and she was like, "Some days I think totally they're gonna give us money, and then other days I think, no, they're gonna think this project is silly or whatever," but then she did get it. So then it became a real project, with a real timeline, and since then, I've been just excited about it and proud of it, and it also kind of comes at a time where I think, like, well, about 2 years ago, so in the fall of 2023, I looked up, and I call it dumpy mom syndrome. I had dumpy mom syndrome. It was like I looked up and the, scale was not pretty, and I was having these, like, awful afternoon slumps where it would be 4 PM and I'd be like, "I cannot go on. like, have to lay down." Like, I just kind of realized, "Oh, I have been" turns out if you ignore your health, it will go away. And not that I was completely ignoring it, but just hadn't been on the priority list for a while between, having 3 babies in 3 years and launching a practice and making it through a global pandemic and whatever. It was just kinda like, "Okay, it's time to dig myself out of this deep hole and try to feel better." And it was just doing things that we're all supposed to do anyway, like drink your water and get your protein and think about glucose stability. And so, actually, at first, I did this is kind of funny. I did this program that my sister had some success with, but it was like bars and shakes and it was awful. And like, it turns out I'm a real food girly. And it was like 1 star, do not recommend, but it got me started anyway. And I took those principles of like a caloric deficit, but high protein. And just, it took a full 2 years. Like, it was back to school 2 years ago. So just now, 2 years. This year, I added strength training, which is something new that I'd never done in my life. And that has been totally incredible. And it's my entire personality now. So now this podcast is about the gym.
So I'm a gym rat. Can't help
Yeah,
it. Sorry.
no, I'm kidding. But anyway, all this to say, good for you, Janelle. What does this have to do with poetry? It's kind of just like that this book has like been birthed into the world like during a time for me when I'm just feeling especially alive and especially creative and like I'm back and like, that feels really just in alignment with who I am and where I am right now as a person. Because even just a few years ago, it was kind of like I'm just busy getting through the day and not feeling very inspired. And obviously, like, I've been writing these poems over time and collecting this body of work over time. But as far as like sharing it with everyone and putting it out into the world, it feels really good to be doing it now.
Perfect timing. Once
Yeah,
again, it's
yeah.
all aligning.
Yeah.
So, I have been recommending this book since it came out. I've been recommending people buy it whenever someone's like, "What gift can I give my midwife?"
Oh,
Because midwives, like, it's so sweet to give a gift, but like,
yeah.
I feel like it's like a lot of times it's the same stuff over and over again. So I've been like, this is the best gift to give your midwife. Give your midwife this book. It's so great. But then when my friend asked me, like, I'm trying to think, like, what could I give Janelle? And I was like, well, I guess I shouldn't recommend your book for her to give to you. But that is just my thoughts for those of you who are listening. I think this is the most special gift to anyone, to any mother. It's just so relatable. It's so full of depth and joy and beauty and sorrow. And anyone Anyone would love it. And it's just so beautifully put together. That's what's so special. I mean, this is just like everything about it is just so gorgeous.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm really proud of how much intention went into it. So the cover art was done by a letterpress artist in North Carolina. Her name is Kimberly Obie, and so she created the art and then letterpressed some special edition books, which is where the grant came in. And we did women's health herbs. So let's see, on the cover there's motherwort, calendula, evening primrose, chamomile, red raspberry leaf.
mm,
And then there's page breaks throughout the book that also have the same botanicals.
it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Janelle, I'm so grateful to know you. I'm so grateful that you are in the area that I'm in. And it has been such a blessing to know you and to be able to have people hear your heart and what midwifery is to you and what midwifery can be, for maybe for those who are practicing but have lost the spark or have lost the goal. Like, what is this? Why am I doing this? Just hearing the way that you explain things and seeing, myself seeing the way that you care for your clients is just, it just fills me with joy and love. So thank you for all of the things that you have brought into the world, for your gifts, for the way that you midwife, for the way that you write and inspire, and just you are just so wonderful. I'm honored. Thank you for coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast. How are we feeling? Held and loved? As we wrap up such a beautiful episode, I want to share a few thoughts in this week's episode roundup. Number one, your true identity is your gift to the world, whatever it is. Janelle, acting as the midwife that she is, that is her gift and contribution, and what a gift it is. What is that for you? Maybe it's not your career. That's okay. Your career itself is not your identity. You bring your identity into whatever it is that you do. Whether you're raising the next generation by homeschooling your children, or you're in the marketplace sharing who you are with those around you, what you're doing in your true identity is a gift. Next, not everything that happens is good or, quote, for a reason. Bad things happen. Things we don't want to have happen sometimes happen. What is incredible is to see those very things be used and woven into something beautiful, durable. No, Janelle didn't need to have the births that she had to be a good midwife. She was already a good midwife, an amazing midwife with a thorough philosophy. Yet over time, she has allowed these experiences to integrate into her life. That does not take away from the not good aspects, but to see these events bolster what was already true of Janelle is inspiring. It's something that we can all do with our births, whether they went seemingly perfect or far off course. There are so many pieces of wisdom that we can recover and over time even find appreciation for. And finally, here's to midwives like Janelle, who listen to their clients, surrender their own egos, recognize both the beauty and heaviness of birth, and are willing to be with women as they emerge from the chrysalis and transform into mothers. Janelle's first book, The Shortest Stories, is linked in the show notes. Buy it for yourself, your mom, and your midwife. That's all I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Are you looking to extend the home birth support, encouragement, and education? Join us in our Facebook group, Happy Home Birth Podcast Community, and check us out on Instagram at Happy Home Birth Podcast.